More than a year has passed since Argentina surprised the world. From his first speech as president, Javier Milei made it clear that he had come to revolutionize the country. For the libertarian president, bitter medicine is best taken all at once. So within less than a couple of weeks of arriving at the Casa Rosada, he got many policies approved that many analysts believed he would not pass in his entire term. Milei was an enigma, because ideas are one thing, and the real world is quite another. Even more so when you're in a minority in both Congress and the state. What's more, the libertarian president didn't seem to be the type of person capable of negotiating with other politicians to whom he dedicated insults that we cannot reproduce here. Nevertheless, it seems that all these concerns were unfounded. Milei has not only made an adjustment, he has made one of the largest peacetime adjustments in all of history. Public budgets have gone from a cumulative primary deficit of 1.5% to a surplus of 1.7%. But in Argentina, the real deficit was not in the budgets, but in the balance sheet of the central bank. And it's here that the toughest reforms have been concentrated. In total, the adjustment has amounted to some 13 points of GDP. Inflation, under control. The exchange rate gap, under control. Picket lines and drug trafficking, under control. Regulations, there's a ministry that continues to eliminate them day after day. Even so, what is really difficult is not only making the changes, but now it will be able to maintain the reforms over time. For example, Poland's surplus when it transitioned from communism to capitalism didn't even last 2 full years. And the question is clear. Will Milei succeed in sustaining his reforms? Well, so far there is nothing to indicate otherwise. It's not just that the deregulation ministry is running at full speed, it's that almost a year after the reforms, Milei is still firing some 2,000 civil servants every month. The chainsaw is sharper than ever. Milei has been fulfilling all his electoral promises, or rather, almost all of them. There is one promise that generates more and more doubts, and it's not a minor one. It's the crown jewel of Javier Milei's program, the long-awaited dollarization. Why hasn't Milei dollarized Argentina yet? Has he given up? Was he not serious about closing the Argentine central bank? After all, inflation is already moderating without the need for dollarization, and dollarization was a tool precisely to keep rising prices at bay. Does it even make sense to keep talking about dollarization? Let's take a look. Has Javier Milei abandoned the idea of dollarization? Right now, there's no reason to think so. I may have put an asterisk or two on it, which we'll talk about in a moment, but the libertarian government certainly wasn't sitting on its hands in 2024. Dollarization continues to be a fundamental policy. It's true that inflation is no longer a problem, but let's be honest. Milei is not going to be in the presidential box for eternity. At some point, the Peronists may return to power, and how much damage they can do will depend on whether Milei has dollarized in time or not. Under the current system, if the Peronists return, they could ask the central bank to turn on the money printing machine. But in a dollarized economy, this option does not exist. If the Peronist in power wants to increase public spending, he or she would have to raise taxes. The advantage is that, in this way, politicians cannot cheat the people and steal their wealth with inflation. Do you want a real example? Rafael Correa. He was something like an Ecuadorian Peronist. In fact, he practically ate at the same table as Chavez and Castro. However, since Ecuador was dollarized, Correa was never able to turn his country into a Venezuela 2.0.
While Correa is noted as Ecuador's most popular president, he was never as popular as dollarization. In fact, no Ecuadorian constitution has lasted as long as dollarization. In Ecuador, dollarization is more credible and durable than the national constitution itself.
It's clear that dollarization is still on the libertarian map. The question is how. I mean, when we talk about dollarization, the first thing that comes to mind is that the government takes all the dollars it has, divides them by the number of pesos in the economy, and then substitutes them at the exchange rate that comes out. This is exactly what Ecuador did. The problem is that immediately after dollarization, Ecuador had an inflation rate of 60% in dollars. For what reason? Well, because in economics, nothing is free. If you dollarize at an exchange rate below the market rate, which is what would come out of dollarizing in this way, then the market corrects the exchange rate, and prices explode. Conclusion? Javier Milei is looking for an alternative. An alternative where the pesos will gradually disappear from the economy in a natural way, where the adjustment will be very progressive. In order to achieve this, the central bank has sterilized peso issuance, and as of today, only new pesos are being printed to offset rising prices. Or to put it more technically, the real monetary base is frozen. Pesos will become an increasingly scarce currency until they become completely insignificant. Of course, this mechanism alone is not enough to dollarize Argentina. Another problem needs to be solved first: the exchange rate clamp. In Argentina, you cannot buy dollars freely. The government dictates the price, and that's assuming it lets you exchange them at all, because sometimes even that is restricted. In order to dollarize, the first mission is to eliminate the foreign exchange barrier so that people can gradually replace their pesos with dollars, while at the same time maintaining a bi-monetary pattern in the economy. That is, a pattern where both currencies coexist until the peso disappears. And this is precisely what the government has been doing. In this chart, you are looking at the price of the official dollar and the blue dollar, which are the dollars that are bought in the informal market. Well, as soon as Milei came to power, he decreed a brutal devaluation of the peso of more than 50%. And since then, he has been devaluing his currency by 2% every month in a programmed manner. What's more, the dollar on the black market, after a rise in the summer, has also been falling. And over the last year, this has been the most important movement. This policy has been so successful that the exchange rate gap even became negative for a few hours. In other words, for a few hours, it was cheaper to buy dollars at the official rate than on the black market. Well, less than 2 years ago, this would be more difficult to explain to an Argentinian than to tell him that his new president would be an anarcho-capitalist rock star with 5 cloned dogs. Now, this gives rise to a new question. If the official dollar and the market dollar have converged, why not lift the exchange rate controls immediately? Because let's not imagine that this is something so recent that they haven't had time. Both Milei and Caputo have made it clear that, for now, the cap will remain in place. Well, Visualeconomik community, the answer is that the government is not sure that this gap can remain closed for a long time. And the culprit is a character that Argentines know very, very well: carry trade. Carry trade is an investment strategy. Imagine you have $100 and you convert them into pesos at an exchange rate of 1,000. Then you will have 100,000 pesos. Then, with those pesos, you invest in an Argentine bond that gives you a 10% return. When the investment ends, you receive 110,000 pesos. Then if you convert those pesos to dollars, if the exchange rate has not changed and is still at 1,000, you will receive $110. Now, what would happen if, during this investment process, the peso gains another 10% in value and the exchange rate appreciates? Well, not only will you earn 10%, but you will also earn an extra 10% for the percentage of peso appreciation. And finally, you will have $120. Well, something like this is currently happening. Since with Milei, the peso is appreciating, many people are seeing the opportunity to buy pesos, invest in pesos, and after a while, when the peso has appreciated, buy back dollars with an extra return. So what's the problem? Well, this is like a bubble. At some point, all those people who have used this strategy will take out their money in pesos and exchange them for dollars. And what will happen then? Boom! There will be a massive flight of pesos and the exchange rate will plummet. Nevertheless, there is a way around this. If the central bank doesn't want a massive outflow of pesos, then it will have to offer an even higher interest rate to keep peso investments. The problem is that this, in turn, increases the demand for dollars. The more demand, the more valuable the currency becomes. So the peso keeps appreciating against the dollar. And precisely for this reason, carry trade becomes even more profitable. So more people get in on it. But of course, at some point they will convert their pesos back into dollars, and to avoid a massive run, the government or the central bank will increase the profitability of the investments, and well, back to trading. Basically, the whole operation is like a bubble that just keeps getting bigger and bigger. You may be familiar with carry trading because it's what happened with the Japanese yen and the US stock market crash just a few months ago. Do you now understand the fear that this government has? But that's not all. Added to this is the fear of exchange backwardness, which means that the peso, having grown so much, is now overvalued. And at some point, the government is going to devalue it so as not to lose competitiveness in its exports. And the big question is, has it appreciated because the peso has become a better currency, or is it all part of a speculative move trying to hit carry trading? Well, the truth is that we don't know, but it is clear that the government does not rule out the latter. Because yes, the peso is a much better currency today than it was a year ago. And not only because it is scarcer. As you can see, the convergence has come mainly from the blue dollar, not the official dollar. In other words, the gap has closed, because the peso, in the private market, has gained value. The peso, like any paper currency, is a liability, a debt of the central bank. Now, do you think that Elon Musk's promise to give you 1,000 euros is worth the same as the same promise from a drunkard you met at the door of a betting shop? Well, obviously not. And it is exactly the same with governments. If they don't generate confidence, then the quantity of pesos in the economy will be the least important thing. Or to put it another way, it's not only the quantity of money that matters, but also its quality. And how do you build confidence in a currency? Well, mainly with a healthy central bank balance sheet. And this is exactly what Milei has been trying to improve at all costs. For example, the weight of public debt over central bank assets has fallen from 90% to 65%, and non-monetary financial obligations, which we aren't going to explain now, but just know that they are a very bad thing, have fallen from 80% to 35%. However, it is one thing for the peso to have improved as a currency, and quite another for that improvement to be so great that the exchange rate gap has even turned negative. In fact, shortly after the blue dollar fell below the official dollar, it went up again with more or less strength. These kinds of movements are not very rare. In financial markets, they happen all the time, but as you will understand, it doesn't generate much confidence. For all these reasons, MILEI is clear. Until the economy is completely stable, there is no question of eliminating the exchange controls. Specifically, and keep in mind that this could change at any time, the idea is to first lower the official rate at which the peso is devalued. While in December, inflation was lower than in November, then this devaluation should go from 2 to 1%. After that time, when the gaucho country spends 3 months with inflation below 2% per month, then the peso will stop devaluing and conditions will be ready to eliminate the exchange rate controls once and for all. In other words, not until the second quarter of 2025, speaking for myself at least, I would not expect to see the clamp lifted, even if the gap has been practically zero for a few months. And then, without the exchange rate clamp, everything would be ready for the long-awaited dollarization. On top of that, by this time, the public accounts should be much more orderly. The main payments to foreigners should have already been made, and there may even be an agreement with the IMF. That said, we also don't know very well what dollarization would consist of. MILEI constantly talks about currency competition. For the time being, progress is being made in this direction. For example, the Minister of Economy, Luis Caputo, commented that many companies such as Visa and MasterCard are already prepared to adapt the point of sale terminals so that any Argentine can pay directly in dollars with a debit card. A 2002 law prohibiting prices in dollars to be in the same font size as prices in pesos on store labels will also be eliminated. The idea is clear: for Argentines to progressively use more dollars, not only to save, but for everyday life. We could say that he is succeeding. Bank loans in dollars, for instance, have tripled during MILEI's presidency, but questions remained up in the air that raise many questions. Check out the following video.
Además de esto, para avanzar en el proceso del cierre del Banco Central que hemos prometido y que terminará con la inflación para siempre en Argentina, hemos anunciado un esquema de competencia de monedas para que todos los argentinos puedan utilizar la moneda que quieran en sus transacciones cotidianas. Van a poder hacer las transacciones en la moneda que ustedes quieran. Créase o no, lo estamos haciendo. Esto quiere decir que desde ahora cada argentino va a poder comprar, vender y facturar en dólares o en la moneda que consideren, exceptuando el pago de impuestos que por ahora seguirá siendo en pesos.
Except for the payment of taxes, which for now will continue to be in pesos. Before becoming president, Javier Milei celebrated his birthday on TV by hitting a central bank piñata, and it seems that his opinion of the central bank has not improved over the years. The goal is clear: to close the central bank. But wait a minute, does this mean that the government will collect taxes and pay its officials in dollars? Because if every Argentine can choose in which currency he or she wants to pay his taxes or collect a public salary, besides being a hassle, everyone would choose highly devalued currencies in order to pay less taxes. The alternative, of course, would be that even if you could pay with the currency you want, taxes and wages would be pegged to the dollar. But naturally, this implies privileging one currency over the rest, which does not fit very well with the idea of currency competition, does it? But the other alternative would be to continue charging taxes in pesos. But if you close a central bank, either you have converted them into de facto dollars before, or they will lose all their value. A much talked about model is that of Peru, which went from having the second highest hyperinflation in all of Latin America, behind only Venezuela, to the sol being one of the most stable currencies. Behind this is the dirty float, which is basically the idea of letting the currency revalue freely against the dollar, but always within margins. If it becomes more expensive or cheaper, then the central bank acts. This has worked very well in maintaining the value of the currency. However, this model needs the central bank to keep an eye on the value of the peso, and don't imagine that the central bank would take a back seat in this. In Peru, without going any further, the reserves of dollars that it has to keep to sell them if necessary amount to 30% of the GDP, which is a real outrage. The net reserves of the Central Bank of Argentina, by the way, are directly negative. The loan that Javier Milei is negotiating with the IMF, which would basically serve to give the BCRA more room for maneuver, may play a key role here. Having said all this, let's keep one thing in mind. So far, Javier Milei's policy has been much more orthodox and pragmatic than anyone could have expected, so he will most likely stop with the weird tales and do a more or less traditional dollarization. That is, as long as the economy is stable and there is no danger of inflation anywhere. But at this point, the questions are for you. Do you think the gap will remain closed for a good stretch, or has this episode been a mere anecdote? When will we see the end of the exchange rate clamp? And what will Javier Milei's dollarization that comes next be like? You can leave me your answers here in the comments. And always, don't forget that here on Visualeconomik, we release new videos every week. So subscribe to this channel and hit the little bell so you never miss any of our updates. If you like this video, hit the like button, and I'll see you in the next one. All the best. See you next time.